Hello, good evening. We begin the news hour with breaking news. UEFA members have unanimously voted to boycott the World Cup if FIFA's plans to sell stakes in the World Cup proceed. European football authorities held an emergency meeting this afternoon in response to the proposals set out this week by the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino. UEFA then released a lengthy statement insisting that some things are simply too important to sell. Well, in a moment, we'll get the thoughts of the former FA chairman, David Bernstein. But first, let's bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. Rob, do you think this means, with so much anger and opposition, that this plan can possibly go ahead?
This is the nuclear option that UEFA have taken, saying that none of their 55 nations will participate in FIFA competitions as long as Gianni Infantino goes ahead with these plans. It was 2 days ago that Sky News revealed that UEFA was considering a boycott of the World Cup. And now, after an emergency meeting today, virtually, they have decided to go ahead with that threat. The fact that none of their teams, including England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the world champions in men's and women's football, Spain, will participate as long as Gianni Infantino tries to sell part of the World Cup to private investors. And UEFA has called that an irresponsible and indefensible decision. And they're talking about governance by intimidation because, well, Infantino is trying to present this as a democratic decision with a consultation. Well, UEFA believe it's an act of coercion because we uncovered that they only have until September the 19th members nations around the world to decide whether or not to accept these proposals. That would see a new spin-off vehicle created to oversee the commercial operations for the World Cup, with around 20% of it owned by private investors, all with links to Donald Trump and his family as well, which has sparked a lot of concern. Well, this is what UEFA said after the meeting finished a short time ago. UEFA and its 55 member associations stand as one. We unanimously and unequivocally reject FIFA's proposal to transfer ownership interests in the World Cup and other FIFA competitions to private investors. The World Cup cannot be treated as an investment product. It is one of football's greatest sporting legacies. It has been built over generations by players, national teams and supporters across every continent. Some things are simply too important to sell. The FIFA World Cup belongs to football. It always will. And so long as Europe has a voice, it will never be for sale. Well, they are very strong words coming on the 60th anniversary of England winning the Men's World Cup. And now it is over to FIFA. What does happen? It was in 2021 that UEFA did last deploy the threat of boycotting the World Cup. That was to stop FIFA doubling the frequency from every 4 years to every 2 years. They were so concerned about the impact on their competitions. Well, ultimately, FIFA had to back down then. What will they do now, having formed these plans in secret with JP Morgan and people linked to Donald Trump? Well, it has raised a lot of questions about Gianni Infantino's leadership, with UEFA themselves this week talking about how FIFA are enriching themselves and their friends. And it brings back into the spotlight that relationship between Infantino and Trump during the World Cup, about political interventions impacting things on the field as well. But now there really is a full-scale sort of civil war within world football.
OK, Rob, thank you very much for that update. Well, in the last few moments, the FA have issued a statement. Let's take a look. They say we stand shoulder to shoulder with our European colleagues and fully support the collective view. We oppose FIFA's plans. The FIFA World Cup belongs to football and always will. Well, let's get more reaction now from the former chairman of the FA, David Bernstein. Good to have you on the programme. Clearly a developing story this evening. UEFA members will boycott the World Cup if this plan goes ahead. Your reaction?
My reaction is, first of all, this was a totally unacceptable deal. I'm delighted that UEFA have taken this stance and that we're part of that. This is another example of terrible governance within FIFA, but I think this time Infantino and FIFA have gone a step too far, and I'm very pleased to see that this is a real eyeball-to-eyeball situation between UEFA and FIFA. But it's time this happened, and I'm very pleased and very supportive of it.
Yeah, so much opposition, so much anger, a really punchy statement, wasn't it, saying this is not merely a profound failure of leadership, but an abdication of FIFA's duty as the custodian of world football. UEFA saying Europe's position is clear, will never land this model, our legitimacy. I mean, how can the plan possibly go ahead after this?
Well, I hope it won't. You know, this deal was done with no governance at all, done in secret, with a very tight timetable to try and force a sort of resolution. You know, and with Donald Trump's friends and family and so on. I mean, it really, in a way, beggars belief when you sit back and think about it. So, I don't think a World Cup can really take place without UEFA. You can't have Spain and France and ourselves and Holland and Germany and so on not in a World Cup. So, I suspect this will be resolved, but I really hope that UEFA stick by their guns now. They've taken a stance. They really need to stay with it, and this will need a back down, a real back down by Infantino and FIFA. I don't think there's room for compromise. You can't compromise on a situation of this sort.
What about the FA? We've just heard from them. They say we stand shoulder to shoulder with our European colleagues and fully support the collective view. How do you think they should play it?
I think they're playing it the right way. You know, England on its own, you know, we're a big nation in football, but we can't do very much on our own. If we try to do something against FIFA, frankly, they would tell us where to go. But with UEFA, we're very, very powerful. So I think it's absolutely right that we work with UEFA. We're part of that. And in a sense, we let UEFA lead on this as long as we give it our full support. So I think the positioning, the wording of what they said is absolutely right.
Yeah, certain irony, isn't there, that this row happening 60 years to the day that England won the World Cup?
Indeed, I'm afraid to say I remember it well. I'm of an age that I watched on telly, and my wife and I went to outside the hotel in Knightsbridge where the team was staying afterwards to see the celebrations. It was a day to remember. Little did I think that 60 years afterwards we'll still be talking about it as our only international win. But there you go. But we need to, you know, I hope we're part of the next World Cup, and I hope Europe is part of it, but this deal needs to be put aside. But by the way, I think there are other solutions. There are other ways of raising capital, because I think the only merit about this in principle is that I think to raise substantial funds to distribute to national societies, particularly the poorer ones across the world, where a great deal of work can be done on infrastructure, helping kids with their football and so on, is very important. So I think there's a sort of an element of merit, but not to do it this way.
It's not just about the moral high ground with this. There is it? The Premier League, the biggest league in the world, the Champions League, the biggest competition in club football. I mean, would an expanded World Cup with more teams played every couple of years rather than 4 also be a commercial threat to European football?
Well, it would indeed. I mean, the beauty of the World Cup is that it's not every 2 years or every year. You know, every 4 years, it sort of gives time for other things to take place. It's a bit like the Olympic Games. You know, if you have the Olympic Games every year, it will lose its value. I think every 4 years is right. But there is a danger, of course, with this sort of commerciality and bringing in commercial investors of this sort, that the things you're describing would happen. Higher ticket prices and more advertising and various commercial things that we would find very acceptable.
I suppose, David, you know, for very wealthy teams, for huge footballing organisations, it's easy to sort of stand up against this. But for those smaller operations, we heard today, for example, from the head of the Czech FA telling our city editor, Mark Kleiman, that this deal would provide valuable extra funding for grassroots football, for infrastructure. I mean, there are those who could actually benefit from this.
There are indeed. I just said that I think the only merit about this is that the idea of raising capital and funds to distribute it this way does have some sense, but not to be done this way. But I think there is another way that I think it could be done, which I could describe now if you want me to. It will take a few moments for me to do that.
OK, we will leave it there. Thank you very much for your reaction to that breaking news. David Bernstein, former chairman of the FA, thank you very much indeed.
That's a pleasure.